Hello everyone, I hope I find you all well. Today we're going to take a quick look at this lovely brand new for 2020 Papo Chilesaurus. As far as I'm aware, this is the first figure of this genus, and it's an unusual choice for Papo, and it's a very welcome one, because it's a slightly obscure genus, it's a slightly unusual animal. What's also a welcome choice is that the inspiration seems to be taken from the artwork by Julius Sciutoni. I hope I've pronounced that correctly this time, thank you Luigi Gaskell, which came out with a paper, so the overall proportions and look of it are very similar to that, and it's quite nice to have a figure based on one of Julius's lovely, vibrant, dynamic artworks. However, of course, the patterns and the pose are totally different. As per Papo's usual standards, they've gone for a deeply peculiar pose. So what was a small, gracile, bipedal theropod has been put down on all fours, so the long hind limbs are sort of pushed out into this odd lizardy splayed position, and the little stubby front limbs are down on the ground with the hands very much pronated. Papo do peculiar things, and they're absolutely dedicated to doing peculiar things, because producing a figure like this in a complicated shape is far harder than producing one in a standard walking pose or anything like that. Some of the evidence of that is visible on the body of the figure, where you can just see tiny, very, very fine seam lines in some places. So it's obviously been moulded in several parts and had to put together. The production standards are incredibly high. So posture aside, the posture does at least allow them to give you a good clear view of the cloacal vent, which is an extra little detail which I like to put in. Posture aside, the coloration is excellent, it's very naturalistic. This is also a little lizard-like to me. I haven't seen anything else that looks quite like this. And the different colours, the different tones, you can see they're quite sort of orangey and beige. But on the back of the head here, we've got a sort of bluey green, and that's the only place on the body of this figure where the sort of blue-green appears is around the head. The rest of it's a more sort of mossy green. And the way the dappled markings tone across the body is very nicely done. So they'll go from a kind of brown to a green, and it's all sort of very naturalistic and really, really effectively done. And then the paler sort of counter-shaded underside. And then the points, so, you know, like a cat, something is a seal point cat, or a fox or something, the extremities of the limbs are a different tone, as they are on this figure. And it's a nice touch. It does add to the realism, even though realism is detracted from in many other ways. So if we look at the proportions, the neck is possibly a little long, the trunk of the body is perhaps a little long, and the tail is perhaps a little short. Papo do seem to shorten the tails on the figures quite a lot. It's a bit of a shame. So anyway, negative points aside, we'll look at the good points. So first off, we'll take a look at this head. Now, the subtlety of the sculpting on the head. Papo dinosaurs are clearly still sculpted by hand from the start. You can almost see the little tool marks which have created the scales on this very, very fine skin. First of all, we're going to take a good look at the head, so you can see how nicely sculpted the beak and the nostrils are, and how even the sculpt is. Obviously, because the figure's so small, struggling to focus a little here. It's almost turtle-like, but there's definitely a bird-like look to that as well. And this articulated jaw is very, very neatly done, very smooth. They really do brilliantly well executed articulated jaws, Papo. And inside of this tiny little mouth, you have painted teeth, and they're all individually painted. They're not all one big blobby mass. And the inside of the mouth, you can see there's multiple tones on the inside of the mouth here, and there's detail in there. The tiny little bit of overspillage on the inside of the lower jaw on mine, but it really doesn't detract from the figure. And again, the subtlety of the detail on the face, slightly larger, more reptilian scales on the mandible, and slightly larger scales around the eyes. Makes it look very, very bright and alert. The head reminds me a little bit of a turtle. They've given it a couple of little keratinous spines along the back and a little dewlap underneath the neck, and they frequently accessorise the dinosaurs with odd features like spines and dewlaps and wattles, and this figure is no exception. So whilst the overall skin textures are very subtle and smooth, and you can see the wrinkles here, you know, and look really quite realistic, they always do kind of then go ahead and put peculiar features like these on, which are purely speculative. It doesn't really detract from the figure too badly in this case. The musculature at the front of the hips here on the ilium looks a little bit odd to me. Almost looks a bit like the trunk of a lizard. I think it might just be because the rib cage kind of ends here, and as we know in dinosaurs, the rib cage went right the way back to the ilium. But generally the way the musculature is sculpted is very nicely done. So you've got a quadrifemoralis muscle in here. The muscles in the thighs, as you can see, the thigh muscle here is bulging where it's lifting the leg up, and the way the toes are curled are very dynamic and suggestive that the foot is being lifted. It's quite realistic, and it's the same on the front here, the way the front limb is pulled back. Really, really nicely done. And a slight curl to the end of the tail. There's something quite sinuous and cat-like about it in some ways. Beautifully done. Look down at the detail on the feet. Of course, it's got all these little individually sculpted scoots down the feet. The underside of the feet have got like a nice rough texture to them as well. The underside of the belly, once you get past these unusual features on the chest, it's nicely done. There's a good sort of hint of soft tissues and things going on under there, and the soft tissue is pulled tight where this limb's pushed forwards. Really, really nice attention to detail. So for the price of the figure, yes, Papo figures are a little bit more expensive than similarly sized dinosaur figures generally. However, for the production values, they're really not that far off, and very much worth getting this figure simply because it is such a nice little figure of this genus. And I think it's probably one of Papo's better ones, to be honest, as well. So I got mine from Everything Dinosaur. Thank you very much to Everything Dinosaur for getting it out to me as quickly. I will be returning to Everything Dinosaur shortly to pick up their Stygimoloch. Papo dinosaurs, the early production runs are always better than the later production runs, so I recommend you get them sooner rather than later. And I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this figure with me, and I hope to see you in the next video.